Hello everybody and welcome back to the next episode of the What Topic podcast with your host Josh Deakin at Mr. Josh Deakin.
And your co-host Owen Burkett at Owen.Burkett.
And today we are joined by a very special guest.
John Willis at JRE Willis. Hi guys.
Wow, I bet it feels weird saying that, doesn't it, after months?
It has been a while since I introduced myself on a podcast.
I guess it's just like riding a bicycle. It's like, oh yeah, this is how it works.
Yeah, definitely. And we did a fair few episodes, on the Get the Shot podcast, which I'm sure Josh has probably mentioned to you, Owen, particularly. But it's just one of those things, isn't it, where it's nice to get together with fellow creatives and people that enjoy similar interests.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what we're trying to encourage people on our podcast, like get more creatives on there and to get to talk about what they're very passionate about, and it's just make it more positive, like whilst we're in a bit of a shit show of a year. So yeah, definitely.
Well, yeah, definitely. I did actually do on my Instagram story just an hour ago, like I could look back at all the work I've ever done, like portrait wise, and like I was going through like 2018, 2019, then 2020, and 2020 kind of went a bit weird because I had to go and I go, I met this person in 2020. On the flip side, though, not to like go on to like a chat about 2020, but I honestly think that like my work completely like took another level up last year, given that we had so much challenge in our way.
Yeah,
so,
definitely. Yeah. I mean, having known you for a number of years now, Josh, like your work in photography definitely has changed over the last 12, 18 months. And I think the move that you made to a different technology with mirrorless has definitely helped, because it's helped you hone your craft a bit more, because you can see, for example, like the changes that you're making in your settings, you're visually seeing that, and it's helped you, I suppose, see the skill that you're using. So it's like it's allowing you to learn quicker, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I find that now photos are a lot more like they pop, they're a lot more sharper, like I have less discrepancies when it comes to the editing process before you've even started anything on that basis. But yeah, I'll say we'll obviously dive more into that when we talk with John about his creativity in his life, his photography stuff, where he started with all that. But yeah, we're gonna jump into some current stuff on the scope of things. UK government will it be allowing us out with one more person tomorrow, leisurely? And I did quotation marks to the lads there. I forgot you guys don't see this. The video podcast, we ain't got the budget for that yet.
No, not quite.
Yeah, got a face for radio there, Josh. Face for radio. But yeah, we. I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, the government relaxing of the rules a little bit tomorrow from the 8th of March is an interesting one. Obviously, being able to meet up with one person for social engagement really outside. School's back, and when we get a bit more onto me, most people probably that have followed over from my Instagram will know that I'm a teacher, so that's my extended period of homeworking finished. But for how long? We'll see. It'll be interesting.
That's going to be quite an interesting change, because I think that a lot of people have really struggled with working from home. Like, it doesn't matter what job you do. Like, I just know, like, for any extended period of time, like it just adds a lot of difference to your day that like just doesn't really sit well. Like, I thrive from being with people every day, like working around me, like just coming and seeing me, like just being able to get up from my desk, go for a walk around. Like, whereas at home you haven't got that start and end of your day. It's just one continuous stream, and it doesn't matter how many routines you get into, you're going to break those routines very quickly. It's just like, I don't know anyone who has not broken any routine since the lockdowns started. You just go, yep, I'm staying in bed for another half an hour because I haven't got to do it. You stay another half an hour, another hour passes by.
I mean, God forbid that you'll be late for work.
I know, that's the thing, isn't it? For me, that's one of my big issues. Like, John knows this. I like to be punctual. I like to be somewhere with enough time to like set myself up for something like a shoot. I'm always the first one there, like bar one time maybe in the past. And like sometimes I'll get there and I'm like there for like an hour before someone arrives. But for me, it's the breaking of the day. Getting to like, I actually miss my commute, which is like a weird thing to say, but it sets you up for your day, and
Yeah.
then it retires you down. I mean, yeah, you probably get like pissed off if you live in London and you have to get the tube home in the evening. I feel for the people who live in the very big cities, you know. But like even those kind of people probably are sick of just looking at like their cat again for the 50th time in one day. Or like, you know, looking at food, thinking, "Oh, I should probably eat something now, but I'm still working."
I don't miss the commute. I'm not gonna lie. I'm enjoying the 10-second commute. That is phenomenal. Like being able to roll out of bed, get dressed, get to work immediately is convenient. But I do miss, particularly in my career as a teacher. Remote teaching is crap.
It's
like
a dog
it
bite.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good Teams, Zoom, Google Meets, whatever is. It ain't the same, and the kids don't engage anywhere near as well as they would in a face-to-face situation or mass-to-mass situation as it's going to be.
You haven't got the grasp on them, have you? Really? Because like you can't really. No. It's not like you're threatening them or anything like that, but like you can't really kind of like control them in the right form of manner.
Well, you know, if I was to ask a question and pose a question to a child, you know, or even an A-level student, you know, an 18-year-old, I would just stand and wait for an answer. And, you know, socially awkwardness of somebody standing waiting for an answer.
The intimidation, yeah.
You know, it's that element of I'm expecting an answer, whereas online it's very easy to just say, "Oh, my mic doesn't work,"
or like my camera doesn't work, or my internet has issues. Yeah.
It's difficult. It is difficult. So
it's funny. I actually know. So because me and John both work in like education. I work in a college. I know that there have been some tutors that have like had like not horror stories, but like. When we've gone to the evening pub on like Friday night, like on Zoom or whatever you guys use, you know, that we come on and we'll sometimes chat about like the things that like have happened in the week, because like it's such a different week. Like that feels very natural to just like kind of like just open up about it. It feels more like we're sitting there with drinks and just basically talking about how much we hate working at home. And you got accounts of like tutors saying that students have literally just been like gone, can you repeat that again? And then you find out later on by some other student decides to rat them out or like says something without realising, saying that they've gone and had a shower while they've not been asked to answer any questions.
Yeah. I mean, and to be honest, I mean, I know from working in schools, you know, that is a problem with remote learning and stuff. But it is one of those things where, you know, if I was at school, I would be doing exactly the same. Like, you know, when I was at school, I would ask the teacher to explain something again, or other people in my class would ask them to explain something again, so that they could sit there and do no work for 5 minutes whilst they explained it again.
We've been there, done that on a t-shirt.
Yeah, you know, it's no different. It's just digital, and it's easier, I would say now, to be passive in everything, not just lessons, but like I love meetings on Teams. Oh, it's fantastic. Like, mic on mute, camera off, do something else, leave my headphones in. If somebody asks me a question, unmute. Yeah, I agree.
John's just revealed himself now.
That's it, you know. I mean, you know, I have to say, like, it's brought about some real positives. Like the pandemic itself has brought around some real positives about like work-life balance like how how people can like modify the way that we work. So like for me, I don't know if I'll ever want to go back to like face-to-face meetings on the whole. Like one-to-one meetings maybe, but like big staff meetings, I think like doing those over Teams, why shouldn't people be able to do it whilst they're commuting? It's a really good way of time.
And it's definitely something that, you know, I think a lot of people are talking about, and they bring discussions like, you know, with other countries. Like I think it's like, is it in the Netherlands or Sweden where they have like even shorter days of working, and it's even bringing up those conversations like well, you know, there's a lot more I can't even pronounce it, but productivity to like, you know, obviously with shorter days and not shorter hours, but there's a lot more consideration with people with doing their labor of work, and obviously because of lockdown, obviously they had to readjust on how everything works. Like obviously we have to make sure that, you know, everyone's cameras are working or this and that, and obviously, you know, trying to get the right equipment, etc., so everyone's prepared for it. And it's just almost like you said, like, you know, the thought of going back to the way it was before, everyone's actually kind of hesitant about it. They're like, I don't know if I want to do that anymore. Like maybe we should discuss it and maybe make some rearrangements of how, it has been more positive to do another way rather than just stick the old-fashioned way.
It is interesting because, like, in my sort of career field of teaching, one of the questions that we ask a lot when we're doing things and when we're making decisions is, will this benefit the students?
Yeah.
So the question we ask is, if we change this, who will benefit? So are we ticking a box or filling in some paperwork for someone else, or is this going to make a real, step change difference to the kids that I teach? And if it makes a difference to them, do it. If it doesn't, then it won't make any difference.
These days, it's not enough just to throw something at the wall and hope it sticks.
Yeah, and the problem is we're all spinning so many plates in all our roles. It doesn't matter what job you do. Everyone's trying to do so many different things that we don't have time to, like, constantly try and go back, forth, and flick between ideas. You need to know that what you're going to do is going to have a really good impact on what you're doing. I mean, I hate to use that. It's like a managerial term, isn't it? Whenever they go like, oh, what's the impact of what you're doing? But the reality is that, what we do, our time is precious. Everyone's time is precious. And I think never has that been more apparent than the last 12 months, of the fact that, we've had more time with people at home, or more time with, potentially, if you've bubbled up with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or whatever, you've had more time with those people. And I think most people, certainly most of the people I know, are grateful for the time that they've had at home when they've been home working, or when they've been around their family, or obviously particularly when we had that easing briefly in the summer, that they were grateful to see their friends, and they were grateful to see their associates that they hang around with. I miss my work colleagues, like, face to face, because they are, you spend more time, don't you, with your work colleagues than you do with your family a lot of the time,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Like your extended family in a way, aren't they?
Definitely.
I mean, my work colleagues change every day because I'm, sometimes I'm a background actor. So recently I just done 2 days on a Netflix series, which I was like going back to what you were saying about the commute, like, I actually kind of missed it, like going a different location every day. But I do admit that, getting there and back is that's probably the most tedious thing. But once you get there, it's kind of like, it's actually kind of satisfying to do. But I do miss, like, sometimes I do miss, like, meeting other people and even meeting old friends, like, on sets. And it's just, it does make you think about, has this been a positive, like you said, a positive impact on, spending time with your family or your friends, or etc., or your partners, etc. So and it's just something I think, if people think, we're going to go back to the way things are after this, like, I don't think so. I think there's going to be not a huge number of changes, but definitely some changes within, in terms of, workforce and everything else.
The way I see it, it's going to be a very hybrid change. I feel like, just kind of echoing a little bit what the Education Secretary recently said about the change to the work, to like the day for, like, students at school, college, etc. How much time they spend in the class at the minute to try and push them a bit further forward, considering that we're not going to be doing exams in exam halls this year again. Another year, that's not going to happen. And then you kind of, like, look at that as, like, a wider perspective. You think, well, how much time does John need to be in the office, or do I need to be in the office? Can we do, like, a half day here, a full day there? Like, you go back to, like, 2019, 2018, any year before that, and someone says to you, can I work from home today? Very rarely would you get a yes or someone would agree with you in your office. Like, if you even had that luxury, like, it's like something that was like, I don't know, like having, like, a company car, like, it's such a luxury to have that change in your flow. And I think that now we can really see companies understanding where they need to be placed. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are big businesses that are still changing hands at the minute. You need to take a look at, like, BT, for example, actually, in the Midlands. They've just, I think they've just moved offices now from the BT tower. They've just moved over to, I think, one, what was it called? One Cornwall Row now. Because I noticed recently they've moved they've put a brand new BT sign on the side that faces the Moore Street, not Moore Street, is it? Snow Hill Bridge? Yeah, Snow Hill Bridge bit. So you can now tell that there are changes in offices still happening. So they anticipate them going back, but whether that's for all the week or for a half week, as opposed to, like, part-time people.
Yeah, and then the flip side is I've got friends that work in finance in London, and they work for big major banks, so Lloyds, NatWest, those sorts of people. And a lot of their office space, they had a lot of hot desking to start with, which obviously is not good currently.
No.
But they've all been working from home since about last March-ish, March, April. They're working from home, and they do not intend to go back, so they're trying to break their leases and get away from that environment and have much smaller office space where you go in maybe to the office one day a week to have face-to-face meetings. And it's going to change the way that their business operates, but obviously it will save them lots of different costs. And to be honest, the evidence that I've looked at is generally that actually people working from home are often more productive than they are when they're in the office anyway. I think there's an awful lot I think within society of people looking busy in offices to appear like they're being busy for their boss. Certainly, I worked in the tech sector before I worked in education, and tech people, particularly, I will say, are very good at appearing busy. So like you've kind of got to justify your role, haven't you, whenever you're in a job to a certain extent. So the last thing you want to do is look so efficient that you're not needed. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the crucial thing. So it's
a bit of a weird one for me. I feel like it's another double-headed sword situation, because for me, I feel like I think example wise would be when we was allowed to go back to working in education last year, back in September. I felt more productive than I'd been all year, and for me, like, I thrive in busy environments when people are all around me. But when I'm at home, like, there's nothing that's physical that's telling me that I'm in a busy situation.
I think education's a little bit different to a lot of sectors, though, because education is inherently face-to-face, whereas a business environment where you work in an office, I mean, the downside, I would say, from working from home, if we see this step change going forward, in 2021, 2022 and beyond, you imagine if you start a new job and you're working from home. You don't get any social contact with those people.
True.
It becomes very hard to make friends, I suppose, other than like virtual digital friends. It would be very difficult, I think, to start jobs. And there are people that have started jobs in this pandemic where they are working from home. It must be so alienating to not feel.
I think in our college, the deputy principal started during lockdown last year.
And that's a big role, isn't it? Like, that's a big role to step into.
It really is.
Especially if they new to the college as well.
Yeah.
So they'd never worked in the college before, so nobody knew them.
I think they came in previously, when they were totting up the role change. But I think that was all about they got.
Yeah, but even so, that's going to have been there ultimately won't have been any face-to-face meetings where people had seen them and stuff.
Not
and
that I can account much of.
It's very difficult. And like Owen, you were saying, when you go to different jobs and different gigs where you do acting on different sort of roles, you're meeting lots of different people face to face. Well, that would be one, impossible virtually, obviously. But also it's the fact that a lot of the networking in your industry will be from face to face. Directors seeing you and being there and then going, oh, I know that person, or when they do casting calls, going, oh, we had someone that would be appropriate for that on something else. So if you're not out there, and if the whole industry is crippled and locked down, then that's detrimental not just to the industry in terms of profit, but it's detrimental to all the people that work in that industry as well.
It really is.
Yeah,
it really is.
Absolutely. Yeah, it has definitely challenged us to try be creative in certain ways. I mean, obviously there have been people dealing with lockdown and depression, like Sam Neill would make short films, even though you can clearly tell that they're shooting in different locations, like from his house to another person's house. Like, he started with him and Hugo Weaving pretending to be sharing a bath.
Oh, I saw that. That was brilliant. That was,
and then he did another one with Helen Bonham Carter and amongst others. And and then obviously there was that series with David Tennant and Michael Sheen called Staged.
Yeah, that was good. I enjoyed that.
So there's loads of things that it's obviously got people very creative, put the on their foot, put them on their feet to get okay, how can we do this in the midst of this whole pandemic. But you're right, it does. There is a few cons about this, like the fact that, like you said, like if you're going to have to be networking and meet other people, it does really affect that. Unless you going to be going up to, like, if there's an online networking like every week or so, then, you know, by all means go for it. But, you know, genuinely, you know, most networking, you do go to events like, you know, in major cities like London or wherever it is, and that's how people network. You know, they get to meet them and actually go, here's my card or whatever. So yeah, I mean, there are some pros and cons to the whole thing, you know, with the education sector and the business sector and obviously the entertainment sector. It's just, how do we take from all those things that we're learning throughout the past 12 months, and how do we go forward from that?
I guess without being cheesy and using Boris's words, which I kind of am, build back better. Basically, we have to build back better in a manner of speak that, like, we're not just forgetting the lessons that we learnt last year and this year, at the start of this year. Now it's a very difficult one. Like, you know, you take aside all the crap that's happened in the UK government this year and last year, and you just kind of like take it back down to like the raw differences between people. Like, there were times back at the start of the first lockdown that people were starting to adapt to working from home, and then before the year was out, studies was made basically saying that people wanted to go back to the office. Like, companies were starting to reevaluate things. Like, they feel like they jumped the gun. Like, not every business is, and not every person wants to work from home assets. Like, the luxury of working from home, in my eyes, would be like a 1 day or 2 day week for me. Like, anything other than 1 or 2 days a week, I think would not allow me to be productive. And that's not just in terms of education, but for me, like, getting out, doing my shooting as my hobby, like, that's the one thing that got stripped from me this lockdown within the winter time right now, where it's the most, you know, brisk weather. Like, you don't want to get out there because it's too cold, so you end up sitting indoors more often. Your depression hits a new high. Like, you know, it's not an easy one to digest. It isn't. But if we're gonna build back better, again using Boris's words, which I really don't want to, we've got to learn from those lessons. We've got to, like, look at whether businesses have their workers work from home on alternate days in the week, whether they have a shorter day one day, a longer day another day, like where they do maybe longer hours in the evening on like working at home. They save desk space at the office. They start to, you know, save money in those departments and put it to better things, maybe building better customer experiences and all that kind of thing. I mean, to be fair, one of the biggest things I think that still gets a lot of doesn't get much discussion about is the building work that's going on out in the country right now. Like, you only have to take a look at Network Rail, look around Birmingham right now. Places are being finished up quickly, like the whole of Broad Street down Birmingham. They've completely mapped out all of the metro track now. They've got the stations built down. They're basically ready for people to come back, and it starts the metro up the end of this year. It's going to be like mad. Like, you have to take a look at Crossrail. They've had their problems in London as well. You know, engineering has had its issues with COVID still. They've still not 100% been there, but they've done blockades, and they're starting to get back to their point where they're going to open up underneath London, you know, with the Elizabeth line. Construction's
an interesting one.
It is.
It's one sector that doesn't appear to have been. When I say doesn't appear to have been hugely affected.
Yeah.
Whenever I've seen a few people, like, I've got a friend who's had a loft conversion down in sort of just outside London. The builders that were, all of them, because there's multiple trades involved, the social distancing was non-existent.
Yeah.
Mask wearing non-existent. So, you know, within that sector, and that sector has been allowed to continue working throughout the whole pandemic. You know, so even during national lockdown, construction could continue. And like you say, it's had benefits. So, you know, like your metro lines and stuff like that, they're being completely quicker because there's less disruption when you need to just close a whole street, you know,
yeah.
So whereas you wouldn't normally do that if you had loads of busy offices and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so like we say, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to, you know, go forward with. You know, like just like being a bit more greener with your transport, like getting out on bikes. Like, that was a big major point that was spoke about by the Transport Secretary last year.
All those people still commuting on their bikes in December, were they? I think not.
No, definitely not. Yeah, it'd be heavy with coats.
There's a few hardcore people that would continue to ride, but I think we were very lucky in many ways that the first lockdown that happened when we went through and it was gorgeous weather, helped lift a lot of people by being outside, and obviously this lockdown in comparison has been cold by comparison.
There's just no serotonin levels in the
There isn't.
week.
I mean, it's an interesting one because I think a lot. I've spoke to you individually, Josh. Obviously, like I've not found any of the lockdowns particularly hard. I would say I've not enjoyed. I don't want people to think that like this year's been fantastic. But what I will say is that like I've got a 6-year-old child and my wife that I live with. I'm very fortunate that the people that I care about in my life live with me, and that I've got a job that's meant that I've effectively been at home when it's been too unsafe to go in, although weirdly, anyway, we won't get into that. And then I'm fortunate that I've got a job that provides me with a stable income. I'm not worried about my income and stuff, and I get that, and I'm very grateful for that. And I think it's one of those things where I appreciate that there are lots of people worse off in terms of mentally, economically. I get that. And I am grateful for the fact that I haven't experienced that in the last 12 months. You know, my brother-in-law's been made redundant from retail.
Gosh.
You know, one of my friends has been made redundant from retail. Yeah, so I mean, he worked for Burton, so
oh gosh,
the whole Arcadia group obviously collapsed. And he was being held on, and then at the last minute he found out about 20 minutes before it went live on BBC News that the company had folded. So I understand the fact there's an awful lot of stress. He's just bought a house, for example, so that's like you can imagine that's quite stressful.
It is.
And I kind of appreciate that people in public sector roles are fortunate that they're highly unlikely to lose those roles. But then the flip side is that if you look at public versus private, there's always pros and cons with that. Like a lot of the time you don't get the benefits. I know that, for example, in public sector with teaching, for example, pensions and stuff like that are very favourable in comparison to private sector. And again, grateful for it, but I have to do my time. I need 40 years in the profession before it's worth much. It's a long time to commit to a job where I'm earning normally less than a professional equivalent in another capacity. If I worked in the tech sector, I'd be earning more than I earn in teaching. Oh yeah. And I'd have less responsibility in terms of, I'm more responsible for more people in terms of the children and their outcomes. And I would argue that actually the
invested difference.
Yeah, I have a step impact on how children progress in their lives, whereas obviously if it's a failed project, okay, it may affect people, but often it's mitigated by
with the amount of ones that Google get rid of every year, eh?
Yeah, so and I enjoyed working in tech. Don't get me wrong. When I worked in tech before I went into teaching, pre 2009, I did enjoy working in a tech role. I enjoyed the technical challenges. I enjoyed fixing things or finding solutions to problems that existed. And solving that for people. So looking at bigger projects, so like network migrations and all that sort of stuff. And then I just, to be honest, I got a bit bored. Like I found that, after working, I've worked in tech for about maybe about 6 or 7 years, and I was finding that a lot of the stuff I was doing was just like rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, and it was a bit samey. Yeah. And I enjoyed the people I worked with, and I enjoyed the role, and I actually, because I'm quite a social person, I quite like discussing things and fixing things for people. Once I got a bit further up the chain, and I started just being like project management and overseeing things, I was like, oh, this is really dull. Like I'm not getting to mix with people like I was originally. So I happened to just sort of go into this sort of phase of my life where I thought I want to do something a bit more rewarding and a bit more of a vocation, a calling. And there's a lot of teachers within my family anyway. So most of them said, don't do it, you're mad. And you're doing it for less money, for more stress. And I was like, yeah, it'd be fine. And they were right. I mean, it is less money for more stress, but it is an enjoyable career in terms of you make bonds and relationships with those kids. And I think that's what a lot of the public perception of teachers, the media will often teacher bash and pick on teachers and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, not mention the newspapers.
In not the same way that, they'd very rarely do it about the police or fire or nurses or doctors, and actually they're public servants the same as we are, and they provide essential services, because if children aren't educated, 10 years down the line, the whole country's stuffed. Do you know what I mean? Like,
that's why the schools are one of the big points about going back to normal.
They're a priority, aren't they? Yeah, definitely. And it's right that schools are a priority. It's 100% right that children are back in schools.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's the same thing when the creative arts has been affected as well. Like, I've always had, friends and family that when I say I want to be a filmmaker or just be creative in general, they don't take it as seriously. They sort of, they act like very patronizing. They just go like, pat on the back, like, oh, good for you, that kind of thing. And you wouldn't get that when, you're studying to be, a doctor or a scientist or a lawyer or anything or that's consideed respectable careers. And I tell them, like, if you're not encouraging, filmmakers, actors, models, photographers, just anything that involves that entertains people throughout their day, then what the hell we're going to be doing, when we're just dealing with all this stress after the end of the day.
And the way you look at it is like, where would people be after all their work days, in the last year? Like, you switch on the telly, you go on Netflix. That's the industry that you're forgetting on it's deliberate. It's quite deliberate. It is, by people. And it's the same thing with the gyms as well, like forgetting the gyms when you need that to keep your fitness and mental health up.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the creative sector is always one of those things where if somebody says to you, you are absolutely right, Owen. Like, if you said to, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm an actor. There is an immediate response within some people that go, oh, right, an actor. Oh, does that pay the bills, does it? And it's like that sort of thing where you just think,
it's so patronising.
Well, actually, like, if nobody was an actor, what would you enjoy? If nobody wrote books, what would you read? Do you know what I mean? If nobody took photos, what would you look at?
Believe me, trust me, I've had those discussions, and I would get like, they would go, "Oh, I calm down." I'm like, no, don't give me that.
Don't patronise me.
Yeah, exactly. Don't patronise me. Don't. And the frustrating thing is, they only take it seriously when you've made it in the industry. Like, you finally sold your first book or your first album or your whatever it is, and it's just like, fucking hell. Like, how much? Like, are we supposed to encourage people or like discourage people? Like, what do you want to do? And also, it just makes me go like, okay, whenever we get into the next lockdown, don't watch all those streaming services, don't listen to music, don't read books, because if you're not going to support the people that want to be inspired to become those people, then quite simply, and I'm just going to be blunt about it, fuck off.
Couldn't agree more.
It is true, and I think every sector has that element. Like, obviously within acting, and like my brother-in-law did a fine art degree, and a lot of the people that he came across would often go, "What's that going to get you? What are you going to do with that?
Yeah,
you're going to paint for a living, are you?"
It's like such a tosser thing to say.
Yeah, and I think there's in lots of sectors we get this problem, and it's different problems in different sectors, and I think there's always that sort of thing. So within the arts and creative industry, it's that, is that going to pay your bills then? Is it? There's that stereotypical view of artists are just people that they don't really work very hard, they're just that sort of thing, and that is so stereotypical and wrong. And then, like, obviously, like in my profession, like the stereotypical view would be, it must be so hard doing 9 till 3 Monday to Friday, 13 weeks holiday a year,
like it's really different compared to any other industry.
And I'm like, well, if it's so easy, why isn't everyone doing it?
Yeah,
and it's the same with acting, or the same with.
It makes me thankful.
Anything,
me thankful in my job being a term time person, because it means I can be very flexible at when I get my holiday. Like, I have to work throughout the summer. Boo hoo! Like, I used to think it was like such a bad thing when I first started, but I'm like, well, actually, when you flip it like that, term time is the most expensive time to go on holiday. So I can go on holiday when it's the least expensive, and it doesn't matter to anyone else but me. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's mad. If I go on holiday in the 6 weeks holidays and I go away for a fortnight with my wife and my daughter, if I went away in the second week of September or the second week of July, it would be half the price. But
man,
yeah, we both work in education, so that ain't going to happen.
Oh, mate. You know what? Speaking of things, actually, I'll say you sort of alluded to your previous stuff that you've done in your life, like working in tech. So I'll say I guess we can roll now away from the doom and gloom machine that we've had, but a very good conversation, of course. But like to talk about you and as a creative and your career path. I'll say so. I guess you started with the tech stuff. I'll say, where did you work in tech?
So I worked within a couple of different tech companies doing different roles. I started with sort of first line support. So literally, as you would expect, like pick up the phone. I would be the person that you spoke to initially. Worked my way up to sort of assistant manager and then manager roles and worked my way through and sort of did some key projects and stuff like that within some tech roles. So migrations of, at the time, it was like Windows XP to Windows 7 and then 7 to Windows 10, actually, most recently, that I helped assist with at my current school, actually. But
oh, wow.
And it's interesting because my subject that I teach now, where I moved over, is computer science, and a lot of my technical skills are still quite relevant in the classroom. If anything, I probably add more to the role because I've got real industry experience that I can roll into my A-level or GCSE lessons and stuff.
It's fantastic, yeah.
And that really helps. And I think there's a lot to be said for. There was a lot of disgruntled teachers when they said they were going to like retrain the army and do all this sort of stuff to get more people into teaching and stuff. And I don't think there's anything wrong with aspiring to have people who were in experienced roles moving over to education, because you can bring stuff into that. And I've moved over after having a period of my life, my early 20s, where I was working in tech and then moved over to education. And my wife worked in sort of psychiatrist sort of based settings before she moved over to become a teacher, and that certainly helped her. And I work in secondary, my wife works in primary, so it's kind of that sort of that balance of, it's a challenging career profession. I moved into it really because I wanted something very different, and I'm now 12 years in, and it's one of those things where financially it's not that rewarding. Like I've had to take on quite a lot of responsibility to get what would in the private sector be deemed a decent salary. And run quite a few things. So I'm my head of department. That's who I am. So I run my own department and oversee other staff. And I also run the school's Duke of Edinburgh Award. So wow, yeah. I've got I'm sort of outdoors a lot, and I think one of the reasons for that, and that links in a bit with my sort of creative side, is I like photography, and I like going out and about. And I learnt photography quite late, actually. It was probably about 2005 maybe. I think I picked up my first camera properly, like a proper camera. Wow. And it was because the photography teacher at a school that I was supporting at the time just lent me a digital SLR and just went, just have a go. And I was like, oh, how hard can it be? Turns out quite hard, actually. But anyway,
it's my favourite Top Gear line. How hard can it be?
Yeah, how hard can it be? So I went out, took a few shots. I mean, honestly, like most things in life, I'm sure, like Josh had looked back at his first things, or Owen had looked back at his first acting roles and think, oh my god, that was awful. And we look back and reflect on that, and I think, oh yeah, it's terrible. And then I used to sort of focus on landscapes and the local area around the Black Country and stuff like that, and then did a few different things. So I got my probably the thing that really spurred me on, I would say, is I got one of my photos into the Jessup's Share Your Summer campaign, and I think you were telling me about that before. Yeah, I came runner-up in their final. So I went down to London to Somerset House, and we had an all expenses paid meal and all this sort of stuff, and it was absolutely ace. And my photo was actually shown in all Jessup shops up and down the country for about a fortnight. That's such an accolade. It was really cool. Like, I only entered because somebody who I knew just went, that photo of your daughter would look ace in this competition. It's so summery. And I was like, okay. So I entered it. Got a few little things off the back of that. And within the creative community, I happened to do quite a lot of photo walks and stuff like that back in sort of like, I think it was about 2014-ish, 2015 maybe. And one of those photo walks was for a community called Igers Birmingham, which has since been taken over by some new admins. But the original founders of that, I got quite close to Fraser, and he was really, really welcoming. And I met a lot of good friends, I would say, through Igers Birmingham. And as I was walking around one of the canal walks that they did and looking at the graffiti and stuff like that in Birmingham, I happened to bump into two blokes who I'd sort of seen on some of the walks, but I'd never really talked to. And it turned out they were the two admins. They were 2/3 of the admin team for Iger's Black Country. And I just got chatting, which I'm pretty good at. And I then got taken on in an admin role for Iger's Black Country, and it promotes the Black Country and lots of different parts of the Black Country that perhaps people aren't aware of. So on Instagram, they're at Iger's Black Country, IGERS Black Country, all one word. And we've been in the Express and Star, which is like the local paper for the Midlands, quite a few times. We have a lot of featured work that we put in for people, and obviously photos of the day and stuff like that. And from that, I then sort of started noticing that there was a bit of a portrait community that was happening in Birmingham, and a few different things led on from one another. Like I went to an Iger's Birmingham meet that had a model session. So there was a bit where there was landscapes and ponies, and there was a bit where there was people, and I quite liked the people bit. So I started taking photos of people, and then I started taking more photos of people, and then soon I wasn't taking any landscapes, and I was only taking photos of people. And yeah, I don't know, like I've said before, I'm quite a social person. I quite like communicating with people and talking with people and finding out things about people. So for me, being able to take photos of people gives me an opportunity to have a chat with them and find out about them and stuff. So I started taking more photos, went to a couple of events. Josh happened to notice that I'd started taking some people photos. And I think actually your first photo that you ever commented on for me was one of Leeshouse Park in Hales Owen.
Yeah.
And you're like, I love that location. It's so cool. And I was like, oh, where are you from? And you were like, oh, I'm from there. And, and I was like, oh, yeah. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That's not far from where I live, which is there. And and then that's in the Midlands somewhere, yeah. And it was just one of those things where like that then led to me getting to know you a bit better. We then went to a few portrait events with different people, which then led to me, you, and Billy starting up the Get the Shot podcast, which was that was born at an event where we networked with people. Again, like you say, Owen, like physically, not so much physically handing a card, but actually saying, "Oh, I'm such and such," and Billy turning around and going, "Oh my God, I know your Instagram," like
right.
that sort of stuff. So,
yeah.
And then it was just like, "Do you fancy doing a podcast?" And she was, we were all like, "Yeah, this sounds pretty cool." So we did that. We ran 24 episodes in the first year that we did it, and got some good listenership, and quite a lot of people, like Josh has posted out recently to say we're coming back eventually. We're not sure when, but when we can, because I much prefer recording in person. I think it's I find it much more engaging.
No, for sure.
It's been difficult to record the last year, especially when there's three of us and we're on different schedules and stuff. So we used to record on I think it was a Monday night, and it was really good fun. We'd record every other week, or we'd perhaps record one night and we'd bang in 2 or 3 episodes and that sort of stuff. But and that sort of creativity is spurred on, and I haven't actually, if I'm honest, picked up my camera for a while. I've taken a lot on my phone, and me and Josh, we had this discussion many times on the podcast. We're big advocates for like mobile technology and for mobile phones and using the camera that you have with you. And because life at the moment is a bit different, and certainly lugging around a full frame mirrorless camera all the way around wherever I'm going for a walk doesn't seem really that enticing. I've found that you taking photos on my phone, and a lot of the photos that I post on my Instagram at the moment are from mobile phone photos, or they're deep out the archives, obviously. But it's just one of those things. So where will I go next? I don't know. The intention was to do more studio stuff, but obviously current restrictions mean that's difficult. I mean, I even have a home studio now waiting to be used, but
and recording as well, hopefully.
Yeah. So it's a dual purpose space. I mean, at the moment, it's currently going to be turned into a bar for this summer, I think, at the rate we're going.
Oh, that'd be good.
It might be a triple use space.
Imagine that merging of just drinking,
podcasting, and taking
photos.
Yeah, do it all at the same time. So yeah. So I don't know where I'll head creatively going forwards. I've kind of initially I floated the idea, and I think Josh knows this anyway. I floated the idea of doing it as a profession. Like, I thought, oh, photography, it's such a saturated market though, and the problem is that with the advent of digital technology, anyone that holds a camera is a photographer, and you're competing against people almost, I'd say, a race to the bottom sometimes.
We've spoke about that on the podcast.
Somebody will undercut just because they want the work, and it just devalues the whole profession. It's like an actor saying, "I'll do it for 50 quid less than that bloke."
It's the example of like plane tickets, isn't it? Like undercutting to the lowest denominator. Yeah,
and it's difficult. So I do bits on the side, as a side hustle, I suppose people would call it. I do earn some money from it every now and again. I do a paid gig or a wedding or a retirement party or a kid's christening or whatever back in pre-COVID times. But it's just one of those things where I think to make a living from it, and I think this links in with what you were saying earlier, Owen, to make a living from a creative industry, unless you've established yourself and sort of made it, getting that regular work is hard graft.
It's so hard.
It's hard, and it's my hats off to anyone that has the balls to just go, right, fuck it, I'm quitting my job and I'm just going to go and be a photographer, because honestly that is brave. I mean, I would argue borderline stupid if you've not got an established customer base. You know what I mean?
Oh gosh, yeah.
It's if you've got lots of people that you work with already, then yeah, absolutely. And if you know that income's going to be coming in, but for me, at the current stage in my life, there's no way that I could justify, quitting a well-paid, decent job for the uncertainty of not knowing when the next paycheck comes, and particularly, I would say, with my career at the moment, leaving abruptly would make going back very difficult, because the first person they're going to speak to is the person that you've last worked for, and if it was quite an abrupt decision to leave, that probably wouldn't make you that employable going back into the industry. So tech industry I considered switching back into over the course of the last 3 or 4 years. I thought, well, maybe I could do that and do half that and half photography, or maybe go to part-time teaching and part-time photography. But I think the problem is creative industries require like 110% of your effort.
There's a lot of commitment that you need to put in, and and it's always financial issues that comes in the way, or just whatever that is, like any obstacles that just interferes it. So,
and I just think that, like, with creatives as well, and a creative industry like a photographer, you're not just doing one thing. You're an accountant, you're a website manager, you're a customer service relation person, you're effectively a photographer as well. You're an assistant. Band. You're doing everything, to basically keep everything running. And to me, where I am now, I mean, maybe when my daughter's older, there's not as much financial commitment. Maybe I'm mortgage free, that sort of stuff. Maybe. I mean, we'll see. Never say never, but
I think a good example. Just sorry to butt in just a minute. Like a good example I've seen recently. A YouTuber I told you about before, John, called Blue Van Man, who does food reviewing and stuff like that. He's got to a position now where he's actually recently been able to quit his day job, and he's been able to, I guess, in a sort of way, semi-retire, and he's now able to do that YouTube channel on a more fun basis and enjoy the fruits of the labour of being retired.
And I think that's a good point, because that's the way that I would look at it, is that if I had to do photography to make a living and get by and basically feed my family, it doesn't become fun, I don't think. No. Like, it becomes a job rather than a hobby. And for me, one of the things I love about being creative and taking photos and posting it for people to see and stuff like that is actually just that whole thing of being creative. One of the things that I've done in the last year, actually, is I've somehow, let's be honest, we won't beat around the bush. I'm having a semi-midlife crisis where I've decided I want to ride motorbikes. It's one of those things where I went through, it was about 2019, I thought, I'll commute on a bike, it'll save time. It may have saved time, but it didn't save any money. No. And, I had to buy the bike, I had to insure the bike, all that stuff. And then sure enough, somebody did say to me at the time, "Oh, you won't be happy with just like a little 125 to get to work on. You'll want a bigger bike." I was like, "No, I won't. I just want to poodle around and get to."
I remember you telling me about those changes in your mind.
Yeah, it has changed. My mindset's completely changed. Now I want power. I want lots and lots of power.
Power.
So I've been in the process of learning to ride a big boy bike, effectively, and and I'm very close. But lockdown has scuppered that a bit. I've had rearranged tests and all sorts of stuff like that. So, but within that, actually, one of the things that I did, which I'd never thought I'd ever do, and Josh will probably know this because I don't really like my face, to be honest, is I started doing YouTube stuff and putting up video reviews, how-tos, vlogs, that sort of stuff. That I just thought, well, I'm bored. Let's just do something a bit different. So started doing that.
I think you started doing a lot more of it in the recent year, like our other friend Brad has been doing as well. He's been pushing his YouTube a lot more.
It's about a year and a half, maybe 18 months ago. I put a couple of videos up for a fairly popular Honda scooter, and then they seemed really popular. So I was like, oh, okay. And got some good feedback. Actually genuinely met like 3 or 4 people local to me as well through them commenting and saying, "Oh, I recognise that. That's such and such." And I'm like, "Yeah, it is." Wow. And then they've pinged an email over and gone, "Oh, if you want to ride out or whatever, drop us a text."
Yeah, and Cam went out and did a few rides.
Yeah. So, and like it was like one of those things, like Cameron, one of the guys that comes to a lot of the events, and I go out riding with him, and there's another guy, one of my subscribers called Tim. He sort of tags on, and we often go out and do little rides out when the lockdown isn't on and stuff. So it's just one of those things where, and then I kind of just do it because I like doing it. Like I have no interest really in terms of monetizing, making money. Exactly. I'm not gonna retire off ad revenue. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I see that the way I see it, because obviously I've not got like my own I haven't made my own family yet because I'm still my own self. With my own, my current family, the core.
Is there an upcoming family, or what?
The core family that you grew up with, yeah. So for me, I see my income as being saving for the future, enjoying, most aspects of life, but then also, keeping bits of money for my photography, where I can go and travel to London. Like John, I in a good year. Obviously, we haven't had a great year in the last year or so I've not done it as much. But I probably end up going to London, 10 or 12 times a year?
Yeah.
Because I just put the money aside for it.
And you've got the flexibility, obviously, at your age and with your lack of commitments for a better term at the moment. You've got the flexibility to be able to go, right, I'm just going to get on a train on Friday and I'm going to spend the weekend in London. And you can, and actually when I was younger, I could do that. But obviously now it's... more difficult. I mean, I'm fortunate.
Different ball game.
Yeah, I'm fortunate. Me and my wife both work in the week, so we both have weekends off. So childcare and stuff is not normally an issue. But as anyone that's got children will know, that all of a sudden, I don't know what I used to do with my free time before I had children. I honestly don't know. I'm really not sure. I'm not entirely sure. Well, maybe I just didn't have any free time, but I can't really remember what I did with it, if I had any.
The time just escapes you, yeah.
Well, because now I just don't have any. so now it's I'm either working, helping around the house, doing something for the house of some sort. We're either, particularly like normal times, it's like, we have after school clubs, and I'm at work, and often I work. What I tend to do is I try and work late in an evening at work, so I don't have to bring any work home. But then when I get home, it's literally like food, bit of TV, bed. That's basically it.
There's no change in that detail. It's just right there.
Monday to Friday, that's it. And it's to a certain extent, like some people go, "Oh, that's really boring." But what it means is that my weekends can be spent doing things with family or friends and that sort of stuff. And it's been difficult, over the last 12 months. Everyone's experienced that same thing where they've found it difficult to meet up with people because of the restrictions and stuff like that. But actually, and it's interesting as well, because the way that I'm sure a lot of people will experience this, initially sort of like March, April, May last year, like Teams stuff and Zoom stuff was quite cool. I quite liked it and stuff like that. And after 28 hours on Teams last week, the last thing that I wanted to do was spend an hour doing a family Zoom quiz. So, it's one of those things where, you just think technology is one of those things that's amazing, but crap on both parts, because one of the things we've noticed as a staff where I work, we've become universally available. Like, never has it been so easy to have a meeting with someone. You know, you literally look at their status on their team status and like, oh, available. I'll video call them. And, normally you just hide in the building. You know, like you make sure you're not where you're meant to be so that nobody can find you. You know, you go and sit in another office, or you sit in an outside space or something. You know, so somebody has to physically look for you.
I guess it gets worse. It gets worse. Like even when you've got like annual leave booked in, like they see that it says online, but then they don't look for the difference that says out of office, and they try and call you on your off day. And you're just like, hello, yeah, I'm not working today. Oh,
what part of out of office do you not understand?
Yeah. Exactly, and like there are also differences now that like there's the best part of it and the bad part of it. Whereas now we can now get our desk phone calls through Teams, which. For me, when someone says, "Oh, could you call this person on their mobile?" I'm like, "Yeah, I can't do that really because it's my mobile phone." But now I have no choice, but I can do that because I've got it on Teams. So it's like a blessing that I can call somebody and try and understand their problem. But when then I get an email from a staff member going, "Oh, could you call this student?" That's totally not weird at all. Like calling them from home and getting used to those terminologies when you pick up the phone, going, "Hello, this is Josh Deacon here. How can I help you?" And you just weirded out by it again.
It's difficult as well because it's a different. It blurs the lines, doesn't it, between work and home. So you know, home is normally the place where you relax, unwind, that sort of stuff. Whereas like for me, my office was very much. It used to be a place where I, normally on a weeknight, it would be where I'd perhaps do some work and stuff like that. On a weekend, it would often be where I'd chill out, play some games, whatever.
Yeah.
Now it means that it's basically my office.
Workstation.
It's literally my workstation. And it's one of those things where you just think like, wow, the whole if I didn't have this space that I'm in right now to work in, it would make my life very difficult. Like there are teachers that have no space. Yeah, exactly. So like you're sat probably cross-legged on your bed or whatever.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that's not good posture, not good for you to work in. So if you spend the whole week doing that because it's too noisy in the rest of the house to work or whatever, that's a problem that some people face. Like some teachers have been trying to teach remotely from, say, a sofa and a coffee table. That's crap. Like, and they're going to have terrible back pain going forwards, So it's one of those things where I'm lucky, and I've said this before, like, if you've got people that live in, say, London, where they've got one-bedroom flats as maybe, quite junior teachers, they're quite early on in their career. They spend all their money trying to live where they can. And they don't have the space to have a dedicated workstation. That's the thing.
I empathise with them.
Yeah, and a lot of people will say, like, businesses are providing desks and chairs. Well, that's fine if you've got somewhere to put it.
I was going to say, and you've got the money for it. And
and that's the thing. So, like, to me, it's an interesting one. Like, I've been quite lucky at my workplace where they've said, like, if you can't work at home, we are happy for you to come in because the school is open to children of key workers and vulnerable children. And we're happy for you to come in. But if you can work from home and it's comfortable to work from home, then please do. Now, to me, I've got a nice setup. I've got, laser printer, scanner, big ass TV.
You've got the bits that you need.
I've got everything that I need. Do you know what I mean? The only thing I wish I could do, which I can't do in my profession, so if I was in an office job where I was being productive on my own, outside of meetings, I'd be able to just sit and listen to podcasts whilst I work and stuff like that. Well, when I'm teaching, I can't do that.
It's not.
So,
no.
I mean, sitting there with your headphones in, listening to a podcast whilst you're trying to talk to the kids, probably not acceptable. But it's one of those things. So to me, it's been an interesting 18 months really creatively for me. So I've sort of gone through this in the last 2 years, gone through this thing where I've gone sort of like photos of landscapes to people, from people to podcasts, from podcasts to videos, and I'm kind of just like everything's currently just sort of paused at the moment. Like nothing's really happening. I'll definitely want to shoot with more people again in the future, but there's no desperate rush, and like I don't feel a burning desire to need to go out and shoot with people right now. Like it will wait. Do you know what I mean? Like I'd much rather go and take some landscapes now where I'm not spreading anything to anyone or risking infecting anyone if I'm asymptomatic or anything like that.
Right.
So
to me,
my problem is that when I want to go out and like shoot landscapes and like even just to explore somewhere, I don't like doing that on my own. It's a weird thing for me. Like I prefer having company to go out places. So that's where my different struggle is.
I can understand that. I mean, I do like being alone sometimes, not all the time. It's not not that weird, but I do like, not a hermit, but I do like I see, one of the things I like about my commute, actually, although I dislike the actual commute, in terms of I just hate traffic, particularly on the bike. One of the things that I really love about it is it's about half an hour where I don't have any music, I don't have any noise other than just, well, wind noise, what I can hear outside of earplugs, and my own thoughts, really. So I've said this to, I think a few people have agreed with me on this over the on the podcast and stuff like that before. Having time to just sort of self-reflect, and have that sort of time to think things through. I find, particularly in a morning commute, I start thinking through my day in my head. I start thinking about, what am I doing today? What lessons have I got? What am I doing? What after school clubs are on? What do I need to do for this? I need to make sure I follow this up. When I arrive at work, I'm fresh, I'm ready to go. Whereas if I commuted in the car and was listening to just radio or Spotify or whatever the whole way in, I'd just be distracted and not really thinking about stuff. And I actually find the first half an hour of my working day, I get a load of stuff done. Loads of stuff gets done during that first half an hour. And the way back, it's an interesting one because, a lot of jobs have stress in at some point. And what I like about the commute back home is I just do nothing. Like, it's literally just I just allow my mind to just, not so much wonder, because obviously you could die when you're on a motorbike.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're definitely thinking about where you're driving.
But because I do the same route over and over again, you kind of know the route. So all you're doing is looking out for people that are potentially going to kill you. And then it's like the rest of it, you can let your mind unwind. And I do find there's a lot to be said about this. I mean, like, Josh, you've talked about like depression and stuff like that, and like how mood changes and stuff. For me, like, you obviously enjoy shooting and stuff like that. 20 minutes, half an hour on a motorcycle for me lifts my mood. Like, I don't know why. I used to love cycling as a child, so I do think there is an element of that. Like,
I liked doing cycling throughout the summer last year. That really helped my endorphin levels like rise again. And I must be honest, like, just even getting out just to see some friends, like I'm just going to see my friends. I saw my friend a few days ago, Krishna, who's been on the podcast before, and just like we're just chatting and catching up, and like you just like realize how much you miss that person to person interactions, and like for me that really kind of like set me up for the rest of the evening. It was brilliant. Yeah,
definitely. And I think one of the things that I think is interesting, like when we think about going forwards and how things will change creatively and stuff like that, is I will probably never take for granted now, like being able to go on like a photo walk and meet creatives, like, the two of you or whatever, and going for a walk and walk around the city and do like, I don't know, night portraits or something like that.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And then go around and then end up in a pub.
Yeah, I know. And one of the beautiful pastimes is
and just not to get smashed, and like I'm like pre-recording. Me and you, Owen, me and you, Owen, were talking about like the thought of going to a club just is like.
That's the last thing I want to do.
Even for me as a 25-year-old, I don't like the idea of a club. I prefer a pub because you can hear your. Well, depends which pub you go in. You can have a chat. You can have literally like.
And you can sit.
Yeah. I mean, and the floor isn't sticky. Generally.
Oh my god.
One of the events that I've run in the past, like it was in November of 2019. I just vividly remember that like we literally finished the event. Actually, no, it wasn't even November that year. It was the year before, 2018. We finished the event in Holland Park a bit early because of the rain. It just like flowed in. We all rushed to the tube station next door at Holland Park. Literally jumped over to the nearest Wetherspoons, one stop down the line, and we completely took over the pub before the pub got busy. Like, there was literally like 40, 50 of us in there. They must have took in at least $2,000 in like an hour. It was unreal.
Yeah. And we've done similar stuff. I think all the best photography meets and stuff that I've ever done, I've started off doing the photography meet, and then it's been we're all going to here afterwards to mingle, talk about, show each other photos, that sort of stuff, swap Instagram handles,
It makes
whatever.
people smile.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, and that's the social aspect I think that a lot of people have missed over this last 18 months, and that's what I'm most looking forward to being able to do when it's safe. And that's the thing for me is like I don't care if that's in 6 months or 8 months or 9 months or 10 months really. Until it's safe to do it, I don't really care. I just want to make sure that when we are allowed to do it, that we can keep doing it, and that we don't, unlock too early or relax too early, and then. And let's
not have another eat out to help out this time. I think if we're gonna do anything, and we're promoting a good message on this podcast, is probably the one that we should be improving our mental fitness, our mental health, and actually building back our fitness, because this country is going through a real big problem with obesity at the minute.
Well, and to be honest, I think if we think about going ahead and going beyond sort of the next 6 months or so, the next decade is going to be hard. It's going to be hard financially. The country is going to be paying for the last 18 months for decades to come. So there's going to be some financial hardship coming, and I think anybody that's not thinking and not expecting that is not quite thinking ahead.
They're under a rock still.
I think it's going to be difficult. Tax rates are going to go up, duties are going to go up, everything's going to cost more. Comparatively, we will become poorer as a society. However, as long as we have the freedoms and as long as we've protected people's lives and more important, people's livelihoods as well, so as long as we've protected those sectors that are under fire, so your hospitality sectors, your creative sectors, your theatre and your arts, as long as we've protected those so that they can continue to thrive in whatever circumstances we have in the next 10 years, because there is a real risk, I think the rep in Birmingham were talking about the fact that they can survive for about another 6 months and that's it. They haven't got any more money.
Look at the cinemas like Cineworld, they're on the brink of collapse at the minute.
Yeah, and it's because that unfortunately they've got large estates worth of retail space, that can't be used, and there's no easy way of reopening that because of the way they don't make. It's like I was talking to somebody about this, because I was meant to be going on a cruise. I said to you, didn't I, Josh, in the summer. And the cruise is cancelled. P&O have been very open and said, look, we're going to cancel until the end of September. The problem with that is that you can't... On one hand, they're being blamed for cancelling too early. But the reality is that sector can't operate at half capacity. Theatres can't operate at 50% capacity. Yeah. They don't make any money. That's so they're
part of the way that they're making their money is if we're taking something like a cinema, for example, they make their money on the food and the drinks. That's why they're so expensive. And we complain about that, but then when the cinemas were trying to reopen last year, they were doing £5 tickets that seemed completely mad out of 3-4 years ago when it was cheaper to go in.
It's a problem because I think as well those sectors like your theatres, your gigs, football, festivals. People are going to be nervous to go back to them in the droves that they were going back to them. So what that means as well is those sectors will struggle even if they were allowed to open up fully.
And I do know that they've sold out quite a lot of the festivals this summer, so there's no hesitation. I mean, there's not a lot of hesitation, but
most festivals are outside, so that kind of helps because obviously transmission is relatively low.
But the problem is, when you get to the main stages, it's so cramped that there's
shoulder to shoulder, aren't you?
Yeah, I mean, there was even talk there was talks about because some festivals in Ibiza were considering being open, and I know a few of my friends are going to them. Even I'm like, okay, but then there was even talk about Reading, Glastonbury, Download, and all the big ones over here opening this summer.
I don't think Glastonbury will open this summer.
Honestly, I just don't think any of them will be open this year. I think next year will be the good Yeah, that too.
I think the government will probably put restrictions on size of gatherings. So effectively, because they've already said, haven't they? Like half the capacity of Wembley is the aim. Which there's no way.
Isn't Wembley supposed to be like 45,000?
45,000, yes.
Something like
But they're saying So I mean, it just shows you that we're a way off. Even when the unlocking happens and stuff in June, we're a way off normality. But I think most people would accept the fact that, okay, well, I'll take a small hit of something not being open to get most of normality back. And, it's difficult because what they need to do then is, I detest catchphrases. So obviously, Josh, you talked about the build back better and stuff like that.
Yeah,
it's one thing. It's one thing saying build back better, but what you've got to do is got to make sure that the people that need that support are given the financial support they need. And obviously, as Owen, I'm assuming you come up. Do you come under as like self-employed?
I am self-employed, and because of the whole situation, I had to apply for
the bursary,
universal credit. But then this year, because I couldn't do it last year because I just started in April 2019. Now I can apply for the self-employment scheme,
the grant thing.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, because they've made a change now, but obviously there's like a lost 3.3 million people like yourself, where you hadn't got 3 years of average earnings, so you couldn't prove that you were self-employed to all intents and purposes. It's very difficult because you hadn't filed any taxes, so it's really difficult. And I think there's a lot of people that will, and ultimately, Josh, you'll remember Tom Bartley was talking about the fact that he had a really good year in 2019, a stunning year, but that was only 1 year out of his 3 where he made a big difference to his income. So then his proportional earnings that he would have got from the grant were not as good as they should really have been, because it's averaging where he was, and the amount of money he made in the final year before the pandemic was much better, but it didn't count because it wasn't on his tax return because hadn't come in.
It's quite frightening, really, because my mum was saying to me the other day, like, you don't know how to kind of react to it, but my mum, for most parts of last year and some parts of this year still, makes less money than I make in my role, and she's self-employed childminder, and like technically she can have still the key worker kids. She's been able to work now since like the last time that the 31st lockdown ended. Like, she's not had many hiccups since, but she takes all the proper precautions. She's not been going places when she doesn't need to with the kids. Like, they'll go to the park because it's easy to social distance in the park. The kids are fine for that, but because of the nature of her job, she was very luckily shortlisted to get the vaccine. So now she's had her first vaccine just before they changed it to saying they're only going to focus on age groups again. But she wouldn't be far behind anyway because she's in her 50s, so she'll be still in line to get it probably not long after. I think, I don't know what the age is at the minute. I'm not sure if they're still finishing the 60s at the minute.
I think they're still I think they're still going through the 60s, because my mum just got her first jab a week or two ago, and then so I think she's got another week or so, then she'll get her final jab in a bit. But yeah, it's like I'm kind of in that moment where I'm not even sure when I'll get my vaccine, because obviously I'm going to be 33 soon, and so am I going to be waiting until probably the summertime, or if my application goes through, then will I get it sooner? So it's just all up in the air right now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a similar age. We're not all as young as Josh.
No. You make me feel a little bit younger again, which actually is a very nice feeling.
So I'm 37 this year, so I'll be in the 30s to 40s, the same as you. So it's I think it's unlikely that I'll get it before the summer. So I think it'll be July, August time. The 18s to 29s are going to get it last, obviously.
I'm basically going to get it basically around the week of my birthday, I imagine.
Yeah, it's because you're least important, Josh. You see, that's why. So,
no, you know what?
You're least likely to be seriously
ill. I'm completely fine with that, to be honest, because I understand getting people inoculated at the top of the food chain in terms of age groups actually is doing a world of benefit right now for hospitalisation at the minute.
You've got to protect the most vulnerable people within society. So statistically, COVID looks like it's affecting older people more seriously. It's not to say that there aren't younger people that are getting really ill, because there are, but normally they have underlying health conditions. So yeah, I mean, you go in age order. I did see a really funny tweet actually, which talked about the fact that it was all about the vaccine passports and stuff like that, and then like it was somebody saying, "Hang on, you've made us lock down so that you can vaccinate all the old people. Now the old people are allowed to go on holiday, and we've got to stay here." What's that all about? Like, which I thought was quite funny.
Yeah,
you know,
it's funny because it's a joke, but it sort of makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's I can understand people's frustration, but I think it's very difficult. You know, I think testament to the NHS for rolling out the vaccine the way they have. We're very fortunate
with the test and trace. What that's supposed to be, being in Syracuse.
Well, yeah, exactly. And you know, the test and trace system is an expensive private investment cock up. Let's be honest. There's not much.
It's better now than it was at least 9 months ago, but like it's nowhere near where it should have been.
Yeah, but the bar was set pretty low, wasn't it?
Oh, very low.
So
very low.
it was one of those things. And the NHS, testament. My dad used to work as a paramedic, and so I've kind of got first-hand experience of how hard NHS and ambulance staff and other public sector, like police, fire, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
The reality is they do a fantastic job for our country, and yes, people will moan about the level of service and stuff like that sometimes, but the reality is that for what we pay in each person, and
we get a lot out,
and the fact that we, if we are ill, we get help. It's fantastic.
Other countries aren't as fortunate as us. Like, I mean, the US isn't exactly like one of those places where like it's such a massive difference to like the third world countries.
They're so far behind.
They're so far behind. In like, I mean, when Trump was obviously in position, like he was talking about like like how they could build their own version of the NHS or like leech off of ours basically, because I think that's the best way to put it.
Well, he wanted to put American contracts into the NHS, but what's interesting is like Canada is a good example of where they have universal health and stuff like that. It is interesting where it shows you that because a lot of people just assume the NHS is like a one-off, and don't get me wrong, it is a one-off in terms of it was the first of its kind.
Oh yeah.
But it is a model that other countries have borrowed. So. And like in Canada, for example, you don't even pay for dental treatment, like standard routine checkups.
That's mad.
You don't pay for them. So optical care, you don't pay for. That sort of stuff. So
it hurts me when I don't pay for my eye test. It like takes less than 10 minutes, and they take £28 off me.
Oh, going to a dentist for a checkup, and it's like
60 to 70 quid. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's £28.30 for a minute and a half in the chair. It's like, oh, okay, that's a really. Blimey, you could get a lot. There's a lot of professions that earn less than that. You know what I mean? Like it's and I get that. It's and that's subsidised by the NHS. So the price that the dentist is claiming ultimately, if it's a private dentist, is a lot more.
It puts it in perspective really, like how well off we are. Like even when we was in the EU with the EHIC card, like how well off we had, connections to Europe with like healthcare. Like now it's going to be very different.
Well, no, it's not, because we've got a global health insurance card, so a GHIC. So when your EHIC expires, we get a GHIC. And the GHIC gives us exactly the same rights in Europe for medical care. Man. So there's no difference. So it's reciprocated.
Yeah, funny enough. Yeah, I got that as well. So
there you go. There you go.
Maybe I need to get one.
So the GHIC, EHIC works until until it expires anyway. So because there was a lot of people panic reapplying for EHICs like in the last because they last for 2 or 3 years, I think it is.
I heard about that. Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where a lot of the scaremongering, and I mean, me and Josh have had conversations previously where 100% I'm a Remainer. Like I want to be in Europe, but the reality is
that
a lot of the scaremongering that happened about if we leave, this will happen immediately. A lot of it won't, because we benefit from a reciprocal agreement in Europe. So
not a good deal as much as Theresa May was getting out of them.
There is one benefit, is that if I get done for speeding by a camera in France now, then the systems aren't linked, so I don't get a fine, which is really good. But if I get caught by the police, I'll probably go in a jail cell, probably. So it's just one of those things. So different things have benefited and drawbacks. So it gives us some freedoms. I do get that. So we could do we could change our licensing for vehicles and motorcycles and cars and stuff like that. We could change the way that licenses work. Because to be honest, like the motorcycle licensing infrastructure in the UK and Europe is bizarre. You have to take a test if you were 19, you take a test on a bike with a limited power. What would have traditionally happened in the UK pre-Europe is you would take the test and you'd be restricted on power for 2 years, and after 2 years you could take the restriction away and ride whatever you wanted because you'd got experience. Now you have to take the test and then 2 years later take the same test on a different bike to prove that you can still do the things that you could do previously.
That's
it's very, very bizarre. I mean, I'm old enough that it doesn't apply to me, because if you're over 24 they don't care. You can seemingly just do one test and they're all good with that. So but yeah, it's just one of those things. So it'll give us some freedoms, but then equally, we only have to look at the fiasco with the borders and stuff like that. It's caused some grief, and I think nobody expected it to be smooth.
No,
of course not.
And I am very much, I mean, clearly it was a very close decision in terms of in or out, and
it's a sore point.
The reality is, I'm very much, if we're talking about sort of Europe and stuff like that. Like the fact is, there was a vote. Regardless of whether people feel that the vote wasn't accurate, or people were lied to, or people didn't educate themselves enough at the time, the reality is we had a vote. We're a democracy. That's what people decided. Now, if people didn't make an informed decision, then that's very difficult. Like you can't just say, well, I want another vote because I didn't get the result I wanted. Because that's not how democracy works.
It's the same reason that people like spitting out fake news about the vaccines and stuff like that. Like if you do your research, there's no one else to blame other than yourself when you make your vote.
Yeah. No, but then they tell you do the research. It's just like, what? So follow another herd of sheep. All right.
Yeah.
Oh god, that whole. I hate people like that at the minute. There's so many tossers on the internet that do that.
It's also really difficult as well because the problem is as well is a lot of people. Let's be absolutely clear here. It's difficult to know what you should and shouldn't believe on the internet. So when you do your research, you look at data that you think is accurate, is real, is reliable. And actually, half the problem is that a lot of the stuff we read is either, heavily biased or pushed towards one viewpoint in one way, shape, or form.
Parts cut out to
important elements removed, that sort of stuff. And it is difficult because, if you're not educated on a particular area, like most people aren't bioscientists. So actually, the reality is that we have to look at lots of different sources of information. Europe was very similar. The fact that we had this massive tour bus going around saying it's £350 million a week that we could save. Well, no, we can't. And most people that had done any research knew that actually the money that they were saying we could save, and particularly things like foreign aid, was one of my sticking points. Like, as a country who is fairly well off, and we've got a good standard of living in our country, to turn around and go, oh, we're going to stop supporting countries that aren't financially stable, aren't able to have their citizens living at a good standard, etc., or supporting war-torn countries that need support in rebuilding.
Considering it's kind of part of Afghanistan's stuff.
There's a moral stance there, which is difficult, and it's a difficult situation. And
I think the one thing that is a sticking point for some people is that the government do sometimes give loads of money away when seemingly it's needed at home first. Like it's one of the reasons why I prefer charities like Children in Need, where they focus on home first, and then if there's money still left, they'll go abroad with it. Because ultimately, in this country, we've got so many people who their children are their carers of parents. Children don't have a life that is even comparable to somebody like a few miles away from them. Like I for all I know, there could be someone down the road from me who is in a worse off situation, making paycheck to paycheck, and I wouldn't even know. But like for somebody on the telly showing me somebody in Africa who can't even build proper muscle structure because they're not getting fed properly, like you see that and you think, well, that must be the bigger one to put the money to. But really, in my mind, it's you start charity starts at home. It's fundamental as that. Then what else you've got can go further than that. Like just taking people off the streets was a big issue in the lockdowns last year.
Well, I mean, that's why there's other charities like UNICEF and that focused on separate charities,
Save the Children,
and other things. So, yeah, it's just like you just need to know, like, where you put your money at, and that's just basically what it is.
It's a difficult one. One of the things that was interesting when we're talking about people who are deprived and stuff like that within society. One of the things that they came up with, one of the big selling points for reopening education was that there's something like 3 million vulnerable children that are living at home at risk. And I was like, well, hang on. The bigger problem here is that there's 3 million at-risk children. Why haven't we sorted that out as a society? Why are if they're at risk of violence in their home, why are they in their home?
It just shows you that the money that's going into local authorities around the country isn't being it's either not enough or it's not being used properly in the right places.
It's difficult as well because I think the problem is that joined up thinking, isn't it? So you need local authorities that have got the funding to be able to speak with the schools and the colleges and whatever else that know that things aren't right. But actually, it's quite hard for individual schools and colleges to get that support. Like, it's because obviously the local authority is being pulled at by so many different people, and it's really difficult. And that's why I think children's services in big local authorities like Birmingham and Sandwell have really struggled to cope with like safeguarding of children over the years, because there's just so many children whose households and living conditions are not right, and it's difficult to support all of them. And at some point there's always going to be something that slips through. Always.
It's the problem. It's the problem that Birmingham City Council have had for years with childcare. Like, I don't know where they rank, if there's even a ranking that's external to the public to see. But I'm very sure that like the childcare system that Birmingham City Council ran for many years was always very near the bottom of the barrel, because in the same respect as the bin service in Birmingham, that they just weren't being supported properly. They weren't being funded properly, which meant that people had bins overflowing with like, you looked at two sides of the road. One was one council, one was Birmingham Council, and you knew which one was doing the better job and which was doing it better. Well, like Halesowen and Birmingham crossing over, like Halesowen being Dudley Borough, and like you can just see one side of the road completely clean, other side of the road borderline disgusting with insects. It just shows you where they're not pushing the money right, or they're not employing the right people to do the jobs properly.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I work in Birmingham, so the bin strikes and stuff like that I saw firsthand. Like, I'd be driving to work and there'd be rubbish piling into the roads.
Disgusting.
And it was like, and it was rubbish that had been there for 3 months, on some occasions, and it was like, oh dear. And obviously, there was a lot, and there were community projects set up to try and remove the rubbish, but then obviously the tips weren't capable of processing thousands and thousands of people's worth of rubbish, because then normally they would be supplementary. So it is interesting, but I think, like, on the whole, I think that most local councils, I would say, like, my local council is pretty good at what it does. Like, I don't get me wrong, I think every council has areas that could improve on, but that's part and parcel of having something that's in charge of so much. Like, it's always going to have areas that it needs to improve on.
Neither here or neither there, is it? Yeah,
if you look at any big company, like if you look at Microsoft, Google, Apple, whatever, there's always things that they don't do that right. No. But generally speaking, there's a lot that they do right. Yeah, so it is one of those things, but
it's funny because you do look at like if we're talking like technology, like, to kind of, I guess, push the conversation over to the technology stuff that we wanted to talk about before we finish up. Like, I think a good point of a lot of these companies is that a lot of the stuff that like they give you to use just works. And obviously, like, people don't go too far into the details of like why they work and why they're free. We all know, obviously, the pivotal one about being a user of Google, YouTube, and that you're the product. Not their product is the naming scheme for what is what. But I think
the reality is your data is their product. Yeah, that's it. They make money from your data, your viewing habits.
I don't hate on that as much. I think privacy in tech is a very big sticking point, but for many people, genuinely speaking, it's not an issue, because if you're aware of what you're putting out there and how much they're taking from you, then you can sleep better at night knowing that you're not just it's essentially the same thing as like going around like your workplace or going around a school, college, and putting up posters of all your personal information, putting photos of when you had good times with friends, and that. It tells you like what do you really want to put out there physically and what do you want to put out there digitally in that respect. So for me, when it comes to that kind of thing, like, I'm happy to have my data, if it betters a product for me, that's a big sticking point for me. That's where I'm happy with it. But if it's not, then I don't want to be part of that company's, backbone and everything. Like Gmail is a core service that I use every week in my own life. I use Microsoft products that is obviously not fundamentally paid for by me. Obviously the workplace, like you with John as well. And using Apple products, like we all here use Apple products. Some who have really rejoined a lot of the Apple ecosystem in the last year because of very valid reasons, I imagine as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much one of those, a firm believer when we think about tech and when we think about the benefits that giving up a bit of our privacy. So most people don't realise, like when I show people like their Google timeline, so it tracks where they've been and whether they've been walking, cycling, driving, whatever that sort of stuff. They're like, whoa, hang on, and I'm like, yeah, look, and here's my cruise from last summer, or whatever, and they can see that I've bobbed around the ocean for a fortnight, whatever, and they're like, it tracks all that, and I'm like, yeah, and doesn't that bother you? No, because then when Google turns around and goes, it's going to take you 11 minutes longer to get home tonight. Well, that's convenient.
That's helpful.
That allows me to know that it's going to take me longer to get home.
Because there's nothing more scarier than coming down. You know where I'm about. Coming down that down the hill to the island, and you can just see across the island the traffic,
massive
building up down towards Birmingham.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where you just think like, it's kind of, I'm happy to give up a little bit of my privacy and my data to better the services that I use. Now, one of the interesting things is like you talked about, didn't you, Josh, how I've transferred back into the Apple ecosystem over the last 12 months. So I was Android and Microsoft and stuff like that, and I've transitioned my way over back to an iPhone 12 mini and a MacBook M1 and an iPad Pro. So I have gone
full Apple again.
Deep. Yeah, balls deep. And the reason, and a lot of people at work ask me this as well. They go, what would you recommend for anyone that wants to get a phone or whatever? And I just go, just get an iPhone. And they're like, why? I went, because it just works. Like, it just works. Like, you don't have apps crashing. You don't have random crap in the Play Store. You don't have all that stuff that you associate with Android
all the
products, or just no updates. Like if you've got a phone and the manufacturer's just gone, yeah, we're good now, don't want to give any more updates. At least with an Apple product, whilst it's physically able to support iOS to whatever version it is, 2 versions on or whatever, you're going to get the updates.
It's funny because the technology channels are literally like congratulating Samsung right now for being actually better than Google in software updates. I'm just like, Apple, literally, it's that thing, isn't it, where it's like, oh, look at me, I'm amazing, hold my beer. That's basically Apple telling Samsung to hold their beer.
I even used Google One products, and the idea with Google One products was that you got basically the most core Android experience, like a Pixel, where then you got monthly security roll-ups.
Oh, yeah.
And it started off quite well, but then those monthly security updates just turned into 6-week and then 8-week security updates.
Yikes.
Then it was like, and then all of a sudden, like, I mean, don't get me wrong, sometimes, lots of products don't get software updates and stuff. That's absolutely fine. But in something is so critical, and I think one of those things where, we deal with so much personal information on these things, we deal with all our banking stuff and everything like that, then that's kind of fundamentally important that they're updated on a regular. And I have to say, the big thing for me, now I'm sort of like a couple of months into full integration in the Apple ecosystem again. Things like, having the ability to sidecar an iPad next to a MacBook, airdropping stuff between devices, taking phone calls on my laptop so I don't ever have to look at my screen on my phone. I can just answer a call whilst I'm typing something up. All those things just make sense, but you pay a premium for that. And you do pay a premium. I mean, don't get me wrong, a combination of the MacBook, the iPad and the phone, you're talking $3.5 grand. Not exactly small change. However, I would fully expect, based on the fact that my last MacBook lasted over 10 years, I'm fully expecting that it's an investment rather than just here's a laptop that's going to last 2 years and I have to replace. Here's a phone that will only last me to the end of my contract.
It's what I was saying to you when we were doing the podcast at the Get the Shot podcast right at the start. Like, it's for me, it's always still been the same thing. It's been investment and ease of use that brings me back to those things.
I mean, the usability side of Apple Don't get me wrong, there is still some really, really dodgy crap that they need to sort. However,
me and Owen have definitely spoke about that in the past with things just going wrong.
Yeah, and there is some usability stuff like why is iPadOS still so limiting on a device that's so powerful that I could clearly use the iPad Pro as a desktop replacement. As a matter of fact, now, especially now we've got M1 Max, why can it not run Big Sur? Why can I not run a full desktop OS on it with the pencil?
I guess that's a whole other conversation to have. Definitely, like there's there's definitely a for and against it, and I'm kind of leaning to the against having it because I think that's where that product category thrives, being not 100% Mac. You know, it's probably it's actually something that I read about earlier on in the week that like if it wasn't for iOS, Mac wouldn't be as good as it is now because ultimately Mac OS. At the time of iOS coming a thing, it was basically a completely stripped down version of Mac. It was on iPhone, and now really they've kind of integrated the two in a way without completely making it a seamless experience.
Yeah, so like Notification Center on Big Sur is basically iPhone.
It's a lot more organised, a lot better.
Yeah, everything's like grouped together and stuff like that. There's still things that it can't do that you just wish it could do natively out of the box. So, like my big thing from coming from Windows, like snapping windows, like genuinely, like how is that not a thing on Mac OS in 2021?
Oh god,
like how is that not a thing? Why do I have to pay 99p for an add-on that lets me basically position my Windows on my laptop? Like that is just madness. But
I would say the upshot of that is that whereas Windows provides a lot of the functionality, I think Mac leaves a lot of imagination for developers.
Yeah, and like I'm sure Owen, do you use Mac for your?
Yeah, laptop? I got an iMac and then I got a 12 Pro. So
yeah, so one of the things that I really like, one of the apps that I used for a long time, all the way from early days of Mac OS, was an app called Caffeine, which I now use one called Amphetamine because it's been replaced. And just the ability to just not let your computer to go to sleep. So, like, if you're at work all day and you don't want it to, go to sleep when you walk away from it, so that it still looks like you're busy.
Oh, for creatives, when you're rendering a video, bloody hell, it's
beautiful. Exactly. Anything like that. Because if you're on battery power, particularly, and it just turns off midway through, that's very frustrating.
Oh,
so, you just hit a button. And I'm now, like, Amphetamine, like you're right, Josh, in what you were saying, like, not having that core functionality built into the OS does give you a bit more flexibility. So now, for example, I've got a routine that means that from 7 in the morning till 9 at night, it just doesn't sleep. So it just never goes to sleep. So then that way I know that during any part of my working day plus my evening work time, my computer won't turn off.
Brilliant.
Which is great. And to put into context, because I know, Josh, we were talking about M1 Silicon. I'll just touch on this briefly in case anyone that's listening is like, oh, I'm unsure whether to go for a Mac M1. I was fully charged on my Mac at the start of this podcast. How long have we been going?
About an hour or maybe.
I say it's probably close to 90 minutes nearly.
Okay, so an hour and a half, and I've used 30% of my battery. That's all.
Wow.
And I've been live streaming off my webcam, a microphone plugged through a USB interface that's been powered off the Mac, and headphones. And pretty bright screen brightness as well. So, and Wi-Fi. So it's I've had comfortably over 14 hours of usage on a single charge on this.
Pretty much bang on what they actually promised you.
It's phenomenal. Like I cannot get over how long this keeps going for. Like, I mean, back in the day, my original MacBook was good in comparison to Windows laptops, but this is next level. Like, even good Windows laptops don't come close. Like,
no, you're right.
Yeah. So if you're
thinking, part of the reason why I left Windows behind years ago.
Yeah, if you're thinking of buying a MacBook and you're not sure whether you should go Intel or you should go M1, go M1.
Like, Intel's in the dumpster now.
Yeah, the advantages, and don't be wrong, there are things that you can tell. There are still things that are running slightly below native speed because they're being translated, but they're still not slow. Like, they're still as quick. The only app that I've actually had, and it's annoying because it's one of the core apps that I use, that's not optimized for M1, that does seem a bit sluggish, and I think it's just the sheer complexity of the app, is OneDrive.
Yeah.
And it's because it's constantly checking for file changes, and it's constantly running Rosetta code in the background. But generally speaking, it's pretty good. And like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Chrome, Photoshop,
even Chrome, man, even Chrome.
Lightroom. Everything is optimized now, really, pretty much. Lightroom Classic, which is what all photographers will want, that isn't optimized yet, but it's coming. Adobe have committed to doing it, and they'll want to do it because it means once they've done it on the Mac, it'll work on iPads, it'll work on iPhones.
That's the
work
benefit.
on everything. So that's the big thing. That's going to make a difference. And like the ability to run like I run LumaFusion on my Mac M1.
That's good. I love LumaFusion.
So I've bought it once. I run it everywhere, which is great.
It's probably one of the apps that you'll probably get a bit more accustomed to, Owen, at some point, I imagine, doing editing.
It's good.
Good. I mean, obviously getting more and more, mobile filmmaking and photography kits. Like I just got an anamorphic lens, and I just bought last night a gimbal stabilizer from FreeFly, which I'm so excited to use. So
yeah, tell us about your recent investments, because like honestly, there's been so many. Like you've had basically just a fuck off, just do it kind of vibe.
Well, that's the thing. Like the past year, like if someone said to me like how's it been this year so far compared to last year, and I was like it's a night and day comparison. Pretty much the start of the year, I just kind of said to myself like I had a major like fuck it mentality. Like I just go, well, the past couple of years, like working in a retail shop, an outdoor shop, I've always worked for the benefit of others rather than myself.
Exactly.
And then I kept saying I was going to do this and I was going to do this, and I just never got around to doing it. So recently,
it's always one of life's biggest problems, isn't it? Like saying you want to do something is the easy part. Actually executing it and actually like putting money down for something, or saying yes that you're going to do something and actually then going and doing it. It's a whole other thing.
It's a whole nother thing. And then you just have to think to yourself, like, I just need to take the risk. And because you always think about, if I'm going to spend so much money on this, and you just have to go, fuck it. If this is what I want to do, you need to do it. And so that's why, invested on, a 12 Pro, and then I've got all these lenses, filter mounts, and this and that. And I've just last night, I just bought a FreeFly movie cinema robot stabilizer, which will definitely help with the filmmaking side of things, and also bought a Cinebloom filter, which I was going to originally get last time, so I finally going to get it. So I'm finally getting it, and that will ship in early April. So I'm more than willing to wait that long for it.
Fantastic.
So yeah, I mean, there's obviously still more and more stuff that I want to get. Like I definitely want to invest in a new tripod, because the one they have on moment by Peak Design is so good, but they are quite pricey. So that's something I'll have to. So that's something I'll probably save up a little bit, and then obviously going to get. Ooh. Yes, I was thinking of getting an Osmo Mobile 3. Is that what it is?
This is, yeah. Yep.
So I was thinking of that, but I looked at the compatibility list for my case, lens, and everything else. Like it just wasn't going to do it.
On my, I had a OnePlus 7T, I think it was, before my iPhone, and it was a really big phone. Like it was like a 6.9-inch screen, I think, or something. But it was a 20:9 ratio, so it was really tall but quite narrow. And the problem that I had with this was it was so long that the center of gravity was skewed.
Oh,
so
gosh.
It struggled. I mean, don't get me wrong, it did it. It just struggled a little bit with the weight. But the iPhone 12 mini on that is sublime. Like it just, because this is so light.
Sublime.
And I love the thing that because I miss, because have you got the Pro? So you got the 3 lenses, haven't you? Have you got 3 lenses?
So.
And the LiDAR.
So see, LiDAR's an interesting one. It's one of those things where, like on the iPad Pro, I'm not really that bothered about. I tell you what I do love though. I use this ultra wide lens so much more than I ever anticipated.
Ultra wide, I absolutely would love that, because I've only got.
And I take a lot of photos this way.
Yeah, I see a lot of people doing that now. It's really like a random trend.
For the benefit of the listeners, I'm now holding my phone upside down, but I do find, because the problem that I find, because it's so wide, if I hold it this way, my finger is in the shot a lot of the time. So if I flick it that way and hold it like sort of like that, and then just push the shutter button on the screen, which is then at the top, because it doesn't rotate the whole thing. So it means that you can tap at the top of the screen which is now the bottom, obviously, effectively. And it means that you can get really low to the ground as well. So if you're on a gimbal as
you
well...
did that before as well, when we was out shooting in the local park.
So get really low to the ground, lots of depth of field. And I have to be honest, like on paper, the cameras on the iPhone are not as good as the OnePlus. But honestly, I can't tell. Like, the software is clearly doing such a good job. Like, smart HDR.
It's got to be both, hasn't it? It's the argument that we've had with Apple for years. It's all about software and hardware, the
working
unification
together,
and the working together, the synergy. That it's a synergy pie. Like, everyone loves to dunk into that pie because it's so like inviting and rich.
It's one of those things, and like obviously we're all iPhone users currently now. Yeah. I love Android because sometimes they just do something really fucking crazy. Like they just go, "Oh, we're just going to put a 5 times macro lens on this phone," and like and you just think like, okay, I'm going to take 2 photos in my entire life that would need that, but it's nice to be able to do it.
Reality change.
My friend bought a Nokia PureView 9 about 3 years ago, and it had 8 cameras or something ridiculous on the back.
Was it that one that literally gave people like the weirded out effect?
Well, none of them were. They were all wide angle, so they were all different focal lengths basically. But none of them did like macro, telephoto, nothing like that. So basically,
I'd be freaked out by that.
Well, the benefit with it is it gave immense photos. Like honestly, like he took a photo at Disneyland Paris, I think it was, at sunset, backlit. And the dynamic range in the photo was phenomenal. However...
the however part, yes.
However, okay?
You'd
take a photo, it'd take a minute to process the photo easily, okay? Because there was so much data coming off all the lenses.
That ticked me off.
It didn't stop you using the phone. You could carry on using the phone, but eventually, if you kept taking photos, it'd grind to a halt.
Oh, shit.
And it was very unflexible. Inflexible? Yeah, inflexible. It was very inflexible because
it became very redundant immediately.
Well, you didn't have telephoto, you didn't have ultra wide, you didn't have like for example, there was a specialist black and white lens on the camera,
like a Lycra lens or some sort.
Yeah, which is lovely, and it gave beautiful photos in black and white. But again, like most of these things, like I've got 2 lenses on my latest iPhone. One is a wide, which isn't really wide; it's normal. And one is ultra wide, which is actually really wide. It's like half, 0.5 times zoom, so it's very wide. But the thing that I find amazing is the fact that those 2 lenses have covered me for every eventuality. And actually, I never used to use digital zoom because, 5 years ago, digital zoom was like looking at a potato. But
it's horrific,
now use 5 times digital zoom or 6 times digital zoom with the algorithms and the software they're using. You get pretty good results, to be honest. Like, you could, don't get me wrong, you're not going to frame it in the Tate or anything, but
no,
it's going to be, it's good enough to record a memory. That's the crucial thing for me is that almost 99% of the people that are going to use these devices are doing it purely to record a moment. Like that's it. Like they're taking a photo of their child's first steps, or a video of their child's first steps, or they're taking photos on a stag party, or they're doing they're all moments in people's lives, and that's the great thing with these, because actually, how many people would take a camera, like a proper camera, to a stag do?
No.
Well, one of the people that went to my stag do did, and it got absolutely destroyed.
Oh shit!
At what was it called? Bounce, the ping pong club in London. Was it Bounce? I think it was called Bounce, or it might have been called Pong. I can't remember. Anyway, people that are in London will know what it is. It's like a ping pong club in, I think it's in like Shoreditch or somewhere. I don't know where it is.
Sounds about the right sort of vibe for it.
Something like that. Anyway, really good fun. But the guy that came with me, he's a photography teacher, as it happens. The guy that came with me and took his camera, smashed it off the end of the ping pong table whilst he was trying to take photos when everyone was slightly merry.
Slightly merry or very merry.
It's just one of those things. Yeah, I haven't got much recollection of that night, if I'm honest. But anyway, but yeah, so it's one of those things. So I just think it's kind of it's an interesting thing where technology is advancing at a rate that's quite impressive. I mean, I think we went through a phase where mobile phones plateaued, and I think they have certainly to a certain extent.
There's a certain law that's
you got Moore's law, haven't you?
Moore's law, isn't it?
So
Like,
Moore's
yeah.
law. So that's kind of rung true for a long time, especially with Intel chips, where every year the performance has doubled, or the capability has doubled.
And then you look at M1 and it makes massive leaps.
Well, it does. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's still Intel chips that will outperform M1 chips and stuff.
Yes.
But what's interesting is that we've come down this line now where we've changed the game a little bit. We've suddenly realised that actually just carrying on at the same stuff, and Intel have struggled in recent years. And I think, Josh, I shared a video with you previously about this, about the fact they invested something like $13 billion. And at the same time, AMD only invested $1.8 billion in research. And yet AMD have come out with a set of chips that's smaller,
much better,
more powerful, uses less power, and is better for gaming, which has always been Intel's strong category. Like, the one
when they brought out ATI years ago as well. That's mad. Yeah. So they were the front runner in gaming graphics, weren't they, for years? ATI.
Yeah. So obviously, AMD, for a long time, have always been seen as sort of like the peasant processor for a long time. I hope I don't offend anyone with that, but they were always seen as like, if you couldn't afford an Intel, you got an AMD.
It's basically the same situation with Amazon and eBay. Like, if you can't afford the full price on Amazon, go on eBay and get it for a cheap, mate. You can surely find it.
Exactly, or Wish.com or something. Yeah.
Oh, so God, that gives me bad feels thinking about Wish. Oh God.
Yeah. It's like, but it's one of those things where you just kind of, you can kind of understand how Intel, they dominated for so long that they became complacent. You know, if Apple,
it's basically what Canon have done in years as well.
Yeah. So Canon did the same sort of thing. Now,
they've kind of come a bit more round to the realization.
Canon is a good example, isn't it, of a company who was on the brink of being left behind.
Yeah.
But realised soon enough that they had to switch.
They also got left behind in the printer industry years ago by HP and Jess, not Jess. Jess wasn't the shop. Was it
Epson.
Was it Epson, and what's the other one called? Begins with L.
Well, I wouldn't say Lexmark if that's the one you're thinking of, but
I don't know. Maybe I was thinking of them. I don't know.
But there's Epson, and then you've got like Kyocera and people like that, and Xerox and stuff like that. But it's just interesting where you've got this situation where companies sometimes in a dominant position think, we'll just carry on. We're good.
It's part of the reason why in our shopping industry on the high street, Debenhams and BHS have both completely. Yep. I mean, if they don't know BHS, British home stores, they just didn't adapt. Like, actually, you could argue that a lot of the Arcadian would have got better off if that was the case as well. I would say that I always prefer to go to a shop as opposed to go online if they're on the high street. Like, a good example right now of the change in the industry is actually Amazon have just opened up their very first tillless shop in the UK. And I know after lockdown's finished and I'm allowed to go out of the local area, I'm going to go and check it out because it is the biggest geeky thing I can think of that's in a complete perspective where I have to go to it to check it out. Like, you remember when they first announced it in America, it looked like such a amazing thing.
Yeah, so people in America will know it as Amazon Go. In the UK, it's called Amazon Fresh, and basically the idea is, for those people that have no idea what we're on about, if you didn't think that Amazon was invested in your life enough already, Amazon can now run a shop where they don't need any shop people. So all they
technically
need
have. I think the best.
Yeah, they do.
The way that they've described it, I think actually is a lot more easing than like robots replacing people in some places.
Yeah. So what you've got,
the you've got is the employees do different jobs, don't they?
Behind the shelves, they stock from behind. So they stock from behind and push the stock to the front, basically.
Which is a good idea.
It's clever. It is clever, and they do that in a lot I think in American shops anyway. Quite often anyway, if they're designed specifically for that purpose.
To be fair, you maybe because Owen's obviously he's been quite a seasoned traveller. I'm sure you've seen different layouts and different styles of places like shops in America.
Yeah, I mean it's just like with North America they do their certain way, and then obviously living in New Zealand and Australia they have like similar ways, but they do their own sort of thing as well. So it's just there's so many ways that you could just like design a shop in a certain way. So
and then you've got Aldi and Lidl that throw your shopping at you. So it's one of those things where it's a clever system because it basically uses thousands of cameras, doesn't it, to scan everything in the shop and identify
RFID technology.
To use you as as an individual, because you scan in with your Amazon account when you come in on your phone, and then basically you just pick stuff up, put it in your bag, and put it in your rucksack or in your pockets and leave. And when you leave, it bills you for what you've taken. And they're so confident in the technology that they reckon you don't even need to check, because if something hasn't been picked up, they don't care.
I mean, they wouldn't have launched. I don't think they'd have launched it in the UK if they wasn't confident with how well it went in America.
They're confident anyway, because like even the stuff that they did in America, like they did trials where and loads of YouTubers did it early on. Like they were like, let's see if we can steal something that they can't pick up. And they literally as soon as it leaves the shelf, you build. Like it's as soon as it leaves the shelf, you build, and then if you put it back, it takes it off your bill. It's very clever. It also is very clever.
I think actually will fix one of the most annoying things for probably someone who works in retail, is that when people put stuff on other shelves. Like, if you put it on another shelf, it's completely the wrong place for it to be identified.
My OCD like just goes off the charts. Like when I used to work in retail, I just see something that they put it on the wrong part of the shelf, and I'm just like, oh,
it's like when you see somebody, like you go from one aisle to another aisle. I've seen it before. Someone's done the most outrageous thing. They'll put like a banana, just one banana on a shelf where there's loads of DVDs and books. And you're like, why have you put that there? Like, you think you can get away with it until someone comes and checks it?
Walk into a Primark and somebody puts a yellow jumper on a jeans section.
Oh,
or something like that.
That's such a fuck off thing to do.
Yeah. No! Like every time I go to Primark, and it just seems like most of their job is
the jumble sale.
Yeah. Picking up things that people have left on the floor is the usual thing. Like that is, because honestly, every time I go into Primark, most of the stock has fell off the carousel things in the middle and is on the floor. So, I mean, I don't like shopping at the best of times. So the idea of an Amazon Go or Amazon Fresh for me is ideal. The only downside is, I think a lot of this is true of all like instant online services that we might start seeing in our lives going forwards. I used to use a lot of subscribe and save on Amazon, and I subscribe initially because it's a good price, and then you forget that you've subscribed. One, that's the first thing. But also, the next time that you buy the product, it's way more expensive. Like, so the subscription, so let's say it's £4.05 or something on your first subscription. You get a 20 pence discount for subscribing. So it should be £4.25. But the next time it bills you automatically, it's £5.25 or it's £5.05. And you're like, okay, it's only an extra £1, but that's an extra £1 on every product you buy on a subscription where you might have it once a month. That's a lot. And especially when you consider how many customers they have that use subscribe and save. So it's one of those things where it especially if you're not on top of your stuff and it just arrives, you just go, oh, good, that's arrived. And you don't really care about the price, but actually it's an easy way for costs to creep up for consumers. And I think this, when you look at your Amazon Fresh, for example, like certainly I've done, I don't know, maybe I'm just too tight, but I've done it where I've got to a supermarket and I wasn't entirely sure how much something was because it was in the wrong place on the shelf or whatever. And then I've got to the supermarket and I've gone, can you just check how much that is for me, please? And they go, beep. And they go, it's $7.99. Put it back. I'm not having that. You know what I mean? Like, so,
we've all done it where we've gone through, because Amazon's got that technology where, like, if you physically show the item, it puts like dots on the item on your camera
to see how much it is on Amazon.
That's it. Just like, I want to see how much this costs on Amazon, and you go, do. Oh, that's apparently available on Amazon for about £2 cheaper. Right, that's in my basket. Paid before you've even left the store on your phone.
So you're walking, and you're like, right, I need some HP sauce. Right, is that available? And you look at Amazon, and for whatever reason, Amazon is £2 cheaper than Tesco on that day.
Fuck it.
So and you're like, well, I was going to have a bacon sandwich with brown sauce on, but I can't because I've got to wait a day now for the sauce to arrive. But it saved me £2, but I'm now just very hungry. So it's just one of those things.
One of the things that actually is quite interesting about the Amazon Fresh and Amazon Go model shop is that now the staff aren't also always putting stuff on the shelves. They're now got people who are creating freshly made food for you to take away from the store, which has always been a big sticking point with like, you know, calorie counts on like, you know, sandwiches and stuff. I mean, even recently, the big Tesco Metro in town has just completely got away with their old checkout system and moved it over to one side of the shop. And now it's got a whole spread section where you can just pick up what you want. Like snacks, there's at least 2 sides to the snack bit, 2 sides to the drinks. And then you got fruit and veg that you need to collect. Like, that's perfect for people who are in the city. Like, I know they've been testing out a cheaper version of Tesco called Jack, I think, or Jack's, in like other Metro stores that haven't done as well. So you look at that, and then you go and look at Amazon, and you're just like, Amazon really seems to understand what the consumer wants on the high street now. And that's worrying, considering that they're an online e-commerce website.
Yeah, but it's because, let's be clear, they've got so much data. That's what it is.
Whole Foods.
So they've got, because they've got Whole Foods and because they've got Amazon Fresh.
I love Whole
Foods.
Foods.
Stuff online. You know, they've got so much data that they can tap into. Not to mention the fact that they underpin most of the internet with AWS and everything like that. So, you know, it's
them and
Google
kind of, are the top boys.
They have a lot of impact on our lives without.
It tells you something. It tells you something.
Despite the fact of their union workforce that are just being treated like dog shit.
Yeah.
So
there's always that bit always gets brushed under the carpet. Yeah.
But I think that you look at a lot of big companies around the world, and unfortunately, a lot of them treat. They treat workers not as well as we'd like.
Very subpar.
You know, Apple, obviously, you know, Foxconn, they had a lot of problems at that factory for a long time. Probably still are having problems, but nobody really talks about it anymore. We found something else that we need to bang on about. And it's just one of those things where it is really, really sad that, you know, like sometimes, like, you know, people are, I suppose at the end of the day, exploited to work for these large corporations, but
they're either exploited or they're let go because the technology has surpassed them. And it's a situation in the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory where Charlie's dad,
the toothpaste lid screw.
Yeah, you see the situation where he's getting replaced by a machine, but then at the end of the film, he's the one who's actually fixing the machine. So there's 2 sides to the coin, like in the change of things. Like I can see. We can see technology in AI obviously has taken a big jump in the last year. Like you have to look at Teams becoming such a pivotal part of your daily life now as somebody who works. You know, that's already quite different. And like the way that we treat with technology now, like in the last year, like you look at last year, there's no doubt that the technology companies have had a great year last year. You look at Amazon, they had probably the best year in their existence, I think, last year because no one could go out and buy things as often. Yeah, even then, the supermarkets, they've had a really good last year, I think, as well. Like, they probably had a lot of stress compared to previous years, but they've made it work. And, like, they have people coming in and out of their doors still just as regularly as they probably did before, if not better, you know.
I think the other thing is, as well, is that because a lot of retail's been shut over the last what's it called? The last sort of 12 months, you know, effectively. Supermarkets have picked up the slack between those different sectors, so they've started selling things that
Argos
they wouldn't normally
stores.
sell. Yeah, you know, Argos being in Sainsbury's has meant that hang on, we can do click and collect from here. You know, a lot of shops obviously went to click and collect. Smaller shops couldn't do that so easily. They didn't have the infrastructure in place to be able to do that as easily.
The one thing that I do like though is that a lot of local shops now are starting to get a lot of love again. Now the corner shop is becoming a bit more of a better place. Like, I understand that they do struggle with, like, you know, having a credit card machine or debit card machine. It's still a big cost for them, but they're now more likely to let you use the card machine. I've noticed a lot more recently because they know it's better for them currently. Yeah,
and I've also noticed that quite a lot of small businesses and small shops are starting to do on things like, you might have noticed on things like Just Eat and stuff, you can do like Nissas and Uber Eats, you can do Nissa Locals and stuff like that. So there's
Asda's on there as well. That's mad.
Yeah, so and like Sainsbury's do that thing now, don't they, where they do 1 hour delivery of key products. Like if you need like milk, bread, whatever, they'll drop it on the way past whilst they're doing other deliveries. Basically.
That's a good idea. That makes it better for the fuel economy then as well.
It's clever. I mean, you know, I think the thing is, a lot of people in this last year have changed the way that they do things in their lives. Like, for example, we used to go shopping on my wife used to do the shopping on a Monday because she was off work. She works part time, so she'd do the shopping on a Monday. so that we'd just do it once a week. It didn't eat into our weekend. It was all done. And then what was interesting was the fact that during the pandemic, we were fortunate we could do click and collects. So we'd go and do an Asda click and collect instead. And when we did that, it was quite interesting because once we started doing it, we didn't really want to stop doing it. And the only reason we've stopped doing it is cost, actually, to be honest. Not the cost of the click and collect.
The delivery and stuff.
Well, no, not even so much that.
Okay.
It's just the fact that what I found is that Asda generally, you tend to find Tesco have clocked onto it a little bit and they've started realising, but they're all starting to go after like the Aldi and the Lidl pricing structure in the UK.
Yeah.
Because they're realising
it's been going that way for the last 4 years.
Yeah, they're realising that, Aldi and Lidl, if we do a big weekly shop and we spend, I don't know, say 80, 90 quid at Asda, it would be 70 or 65 pound at Aldi. Now, the other thing is that years ago, it was because you didn't get branded products in these supermarkets. Now, they are using branded products. So it shows you that they're taking a tiny little profit margin off everything, whereas the Asda and the Tesco's are taking bigger profit margins. But consumers are starting to get wise to it. Now, I think that's one thing that might revert back over the course of the next 6 months. People that have been shopping at Asda, Tesco, Sainsbury's and getting home deliveries may revert back to their Aldi's, Lidl's, whatever.
Honestly, for me, I'd happily go back to quite a lot of the stuff that we get from Aldi. We still do actually go to Aldi more than we do go to Asda. But for me, I think there are certain things that I will still buy from the brands because they just have a better... They do better in taste, in my opinion. Like, your chocolate digestive, I can't stomach one from Aldi because they're just so boring.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how... Because obviously, those companies, I mean, if we bring it back to the tech, they've invested significant money now over the last year in scaling up their product deliveries. So, making sure they've got enough of everything they need. Their online presence has been scaled. Their infrastructure for cars, vans, transport, all that sort of stuff. It's mad. Like it is mad, and it'd be interesting to see because obviously that investment was a lot for a lot of these companies. It was massive investment. It'd be interesting to see how long that has to sustain, or whether it peters off again. They start
a year on from toilet paper shortages, eh?
Yeah, which was all caused by people just buying more than they needed. But,
and have you noticed that just as I think a good place to end actually, like as a really nice kind of point in a lot of this stuff that's happened in last year, and if we're talking as a overarching theme, is that there is a lot less people now going out and doing massive buys now. People are actually going out and getting what they need only, and not anything more than that they need. And if they need those extra things, they buy them online.
I mean, definitely. And I think my own personal experience, I don't know what you guys have experienced this year. My own personal experience is that generally, like my community, so my street and my neighbours, we speak more. We talk to each other. We support each other. Like I've got a neighbour next door to me who's both my neighbours actually. The neighbours that are joined to my house, they're in their late 60s, and the neighbour the other side of me is roughly the same age. So they're all retired. But one of them, the next door neighbour was shielding early on, so we just made sure that we helped her with anything she needed. The next door neighbour on her own, next door to us on the other side, she was on her own, so it was a case of like on Sundays we'd pass a Sunday dinner over the fence. And,
that's nice.
That sort of stuff. So I think it's brought communities closer together in ways that we perhaps didn't expect.
And it means that the government don't always win when it comes to asking you to basically tell on your neighbours. That was never going to happen, was it?
Yeah, and I think it's just, to me, I think what it's proved in a lot of the cases this year. I know there's been some real shit times, and it's been not that great, and maybe the government's made some terrible decisions. That's a whole other debate.
But a good conclusion, really.
But a good conclusion is that actually people are good to each other generally.
And we've proven it.
Yeah. So,
Honestly, probably went longer than we was expecting to, but we definitely had a good bash today, having a good chat with you, John. I really appreciate we both really appreciate your time today.
Well, thanks for having me on.
I'll say you've definitely had a long wait to get back onto some sort of podcasting, so I'm sure that you've really enjoyed having a good long ching wag with us. Would you agree, Owen? Definitely.
No, it's been good, and hopefully we'll have a bit more, as things open up, that we can have, more and more stuff to talk about, and then we can even share things that we've been doing, etc. Because obviously the past couple of months is quite limiting. So yeah, hopefully that will spark more conversations. Like, not saying that this hasn't, but it's definitely,
Oh yeah,
on a progressive side of things. So for
it's
sure.
leading in a direction that we want to have this podcast go, really, because it's obviously I wouldn't call it a competing podcast because it's really not in the same sort of field, but the way that we set our podcast is very sort of society and cultural talk, that kind of leans into movies and TV shows quite regularly. But then also we like the fact of having someone that's very creative in what we're talking about all the time join us, like you, John, or we've had your friend up in Canada, right?
Yeah, Mindy. Yeah, that's
Mindy.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that was the first overseas person that I'd ever had, having a long form chat with on a podcast. So that was fantastic. And then completely sometime down the road, we switched the role, and Owen, you come on the Get the Shot podcast and talk to us about your experience about in your field.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to be a guest rather than the host and switch around the things. So
it's very different. It is for sure.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it, guys. Thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome.
No, it was a pleasure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I'll say, if you want to check out John, where can they find you guys? Where can they find you, mate?
So best place to find me is on probably Instagram, so at JRE Willis. And if you're on YouTube, just search John Willis as well. You'll probably find me on that way as well. But yeah, really, really good fun, and good luck in the future, guys.
Thank you. Yeah, and obviously we guys have been Josh Deacon at Mr. Josh Deacon,
and your co-host Owen Burkett at Owen.Burkett.
And until next time, whether it's a week away or 2 weeks away, we'll see you very soon. And I'm sure we'll probably talk a bit more about WandaVision and the next upcoming show from Marvel in the next episode, when we're not spoiling it for John.
Yeah, and then 2 weeks' time, I'll have a very special episode on a particular film, so be sure to look out for that.
Yes. But until next time, take care, and don't forget to wear a mask still, because that's still important, and just stay safe.
Yeah, stay safe. Take care.
Cheers. Bye.